our data centers. All right, so we have, if you do a Google search, it's like, whoa, we have a lot of data centers already in Wisconsin. But Microsoft just proposed Mount Pleasant like less than 2 years ago. Not all data centers are created equal. So there are some that are like the size of a closet. There are some that are the size of the room. There are some that are like a small building or a small warehouse. And you can kind of see they come in many different shapes and sizes. And data centers are like where the cloud lives. They have a bunch of servers, and it's where the data goes and is processed. I'm a physical therapist by trade, so I can't dive too much in all of that, but that's where the cloud lives, right? Okay, where the big health and environmental concerns are, where my wheelhouse is, it comes, and where we're impacted are these hyperscale data centers. And these are super large, over 5,000 servers, often over 10,000 square feet, and they draw a lot of energy. And that's where a lot of the impact comes from. But like, we use cell phones, right? We have in healthcare, they're putting this on us, right? And then you're seeing like AI pop up, all these notifications. So can I be against a hyperscale data center? Okay, because we don't have all these built out right now, but our phones are still working. The purpose and the reason for hyperscale data centers, we have regenerative AI, there is like surveillance operations, like there are different reasons for these specific businesses to invest and build out. It's the hyperscale AI data centers that bring up the big concerns. And so we have our friend, Charlie Behrens, who also shares these concerns. And we're seeing these projects pop up from Caledonia, Kenosha, Washington, Beaver Dam, Menominee, Greenleaf and Green Bay, Janesville, Rockford to our south, and then us, and then Mount Pleasant, where Microsoft just won't stop. All right, so now on to the health impacts. So when we think of health impacts from hyperscale data centers, it really falls into three main categories. It's the pollution, and that's to our air, water, and then there's light and sound pollution. Comes from energy costs, which drives up energy burden, which is the public health issue, and then how it impacts our climate future and the health harms from the impact of climate change. Now, these things are moving fast and furious, and if you've worked in research, you know that that does take time. So there isn't a ton of research out there, but there are some solid reports. And Dr. Han, Wu, Lee, Werman, and Wren did a fantastic research effort quantifying or putting numbers to appreciate the health impact of data centers. And if you're interested in this more and you want it, we'll post this later. But the biggest health harm comes from air pollution. And with the air pollution, it comes from on site at the hyperscale data center, from their backup diesel generators, as well as off site from the fossil fuels that are burned to meet the energy demand of these data centers. Because remember, they draw a lot of energy. And we know diesel, when it is burned, it releases known carcinogens. With the energy burning with our utilities here, with fossil fuel burning, you have coal and gas. And so then when that is burned, we get harmful air pollutants that come from like ozone and soot pollution. And those pollutants are really small. You can't see them. This is the center photo is the diameter of a human hair. And then the little blue dots are PM10. And then the little pink dots on the blue dots next to the human hair, right? That's PM 2.5 or that's soot pollution. So it's really small. And it's those really small pollutants that are the most harmful. Because when you breathe them in, your body, which is amazing, isn't able to filter it out. It gets into your lungs, and then from there, your body can absorb it into your bloodstream and then it goes everywhere. And then the damage occurs wherever it finds its home. Okay, and this can be any system in the body. So soot pollution can negatively, of course, impact the lungs, increased rates of asthma, COPD, cancer. It's also one of the big drivers for cardiovascular disease and heart attacks. So when you think air pollution, we don't often think of heart disease. Air pollution also is connected to kidney disease, impacts the brain, increased risk of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and then it impacts our youth. They're developing bodies, they're developing lungs, and then also related to poor birth outcomes. So a couple of quick facts. The EPA has historically boldly said that fossil fuel-based power plants remain the leading source of air, water, and land pollution. So again, if these data centers take a lot of energy and then they're requiring more fossil fuels to be burnt for that energy, it's going to result in more pollution of what we need to live. Also, when it comes to soot pollution, the World Health Organization emphasizes this is a non-threshold pollutant. That means really there's no safe level for human health. They put the standard at 5, the World Health Organization. The EPA a couple of years ago just strengthened it from 12 to 9. So the EPA's strengthened standard is still about twice of what the World Health Organization sets it at, and it is acknowledging it's a zero threshold pollutant. Dr. Wren and his team also emphasized that these pollutants are cross state lines, right? And so appreciating we already have a decent amount of air pollution here, we also are breathing what could be burnt across the country and like how it travels, okay? And so what we burn here does impact others, but we are also impacted, and we don't breathe just in a vacuum, right? It's kind of everything and how it settles. And so just to emphasize that soot pollution, yes, we've had those big wildfire smoke days, and in those really bad hazy days, we can have these acute symptoms, coughing, irritation, headaches, but it's really that lower level, long-term exposure that can impact us and lead to those chronic illness. So this study showed, they did some modeling, and they showed that really in the next over 5 years, by 2030, the data centers being built out and the pollution from on-site and from the energy sector, the burning of fossil fuels to meet their energy demands could result in over 600,000 new asthma cases, result in over 1,300 premature deaths, and result in a public health burden of over $20 billion. Okay, so when you're looking at the benefits and the economic benefits, who here has like a great health plan and is like super cheap and easy to see your doctor? Okay, you guys are awesome. The majority does not, right? So when we're looking at the overall impact to community in our health, we have to weigh that in and with the economic risk and benefit. I have to underscore that Rock County, and I've said this before, is already overburdened with air pollution. The #1 industrial polluter in Rock County is Alliant. This is them reporting it themselves. When West Riverside Energy Center opened up, it went through the roof. All right, and so their greenhouse gases they report is more than all industrial polluters that report in Cook County, Illinois. There was a human health report out of Boston University, Boston School University of Riverside Energy Center, where they did modeling. They looked at the radius 1 to 2 miles around the plant and confirmed that from the pollution they report that those folks living there have an increased risk of cancer just because of them burning fossil fuels to create energy at that point. We also, again, we're only human, right? Our bodies can only filter out so much before we start having health impacts. We, in this region in red, are in the 95th to 100th percentile for toxic air pollutants relative to the rest of the US. These are reported, they are not monitored. So how are they really regulated? Okay, and then the farther image is the health disparities in the asthma that we already have. 95th to 100th percentile in the US. And this is preventable. All right. So on to water. So water use. A lot of folks are really concerned this is going to use a lot of water. What we're hearing is closed loop, okay? But when it comes to closed loop, it requires a lot more energy. And so it's going to require a lot more. It depends how are we getting that energy. It's probably going to require a lot more fossil fuels to be burned. And when you use more fossil fuels for energy, you use a lot of water. Another thing is that with them often partnering with a municipality and pulling their water from municipal water, it's really hard to have that transparency to appreciate how much water they are using. Clean Wisconsin did an analysis, and if data centers use non-renewable energy sources, then their indirect water use could rival that of entire Wisconsin cities. So they looked at one hyperscale data center from Port Washington, and they said if they meet their energy needs by burning fossil fuels, then they will require for their off-site water use at least 54 million gallons a day, and that is more than double the amount used by every home, business, and manufacturer in the city of Green Bay. Now, what is in the water of closed loop systems? So this is municipal water pulling out, so then it's going back to the wastewater treatment plant. What is going back in there? Well, again, it is really difficult to know, but we know there are chemicals, we know that there are likely PFAS, and we also know that the EPA has accelerated the approval process and want to reduce the regulatory burden to companies to get those chemicals approved, so then they can get them into the AI data centers and thus likely our water supply. So again, there's a lot we don't know, and I don't know if we're going to be able to. All right, sound pollution. We have one of the best, and again, so this is looking at what local communities are already saying, right? So just pulling headlines of frontline communities. The one thing that really shook me is there are no birds around here anymore. There's noting the humming or buzzing noise the center emits. It scares away a lot of the wildlife from the area. And appreciating the 430 something, 400 plus acres where it is right next to the Rock River. Right? It is such a precious corridor, a natural resource. Like this is part of our home. Is this what we want? And then it also talks about how wholesale energy costs have gone up as much as 267% in the area. All right, according to the American Speech Language Hearing Association, kind of the threshold for where you can experience hearing loss is around 85 decibels. The louder it is, the higher that number, right? A regular conversation, group combo is around 70. And so around a data center, it can really vary, go from 50 up to almost 100. So it does fall in that threshold where your hearing could be impacted. Appreciating the closer you are, the louder it'll be, right? It'll be attenuated as you go away. And then light pollution. So we know light pollution is not good for human health. It also impacts our feathered friends and our pollinator friends. And these are images from Port Washington, where their mayor approved 24-hour construction. And so this is just the construction phase. These folks previously lived in a rural area, and it was not lit up like an airport before. All right, on to energy. So Clean Wisconsin also did a report looking at 2 of the hyperscale data centers in the state that shared their information of how much energy they would use. And together it was almost 4 gigawatts of electricity, which is enough to power 4.3 million Wisconsin homes, but Wisconsin just has 2.8 homes. So these two data centers, almost twice the number of homes. Now, Alliant will say that your energy costs won't be impacted, okay? Yeah. But they say these things, but if it's not written, it's not real. And this is what they wrote to the Public Service Commission, and the Public Service Commission is currently considering this proposal. And what they're doing is they're trying to look at it one developer at a time, which is not protecting us. They also redacted all the important information. And it got through to the point that there was the public hearing.
Okay, all this stuff is redacted.
Before the administrative law judge threw the flag and said, you know, this really is bad, guys. You need to go back and resubmit it.
It's redacted.
Which they did, but they did not give us enough to.
But they redacted all of this stuff.
Or not.
How does that taste, Perry?
When they say they're not offloading it to us, they are still not giving us all the details for us to fully assess what they're truly proposing for how to handle the energy costs and demands for the Meta data center in Beaver Dam. And then, as I shared before, high energy costs is an issue of public health. If you're deciding about whether you can keep the lights on, pay your mortgage, fill your prescriptions, get food for your kids, that's an issue of public health, right? And this is a big issue across the United States. 1 in 4 households feeling this. It's also a big issue throughout Wisconsin. It is an urban issue and it is a rural issue. So what can we do about it? Well, we can organize. We can come together as a community. We can be persistent. We can be visible. We can continue to collaborate to decide how do we want to move forward responsibly in the face of these development proposals. How do we work with our elected officials and the Plan Commission and our state representatives to make sure what we value the most is protected? We can also push for benefits agreements if it comes to that point, engaging with our state reps. Again, thank you for being here. There are petitions, there are state bills out there to pause, to protect they'll jump into this later, but currently Wisconsin has only incentives for these big tech developers and no protections. The assembly has been gavelled out though, so getting that action will require either a special session to be called by the majority party or Governor Evers to call an emergency session for statewide action. And then I also encourage all of you to engage with the Public Service Commission, because if you haven't heard of it before, we've all heard of it now, and they need to hear from us. They make the decision on how much big tech is gonna pay and how much we're gonna pay. And they need to hear from us. Also engage with the DNR, the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, and with the air permits, and invite your state reps to advocate beside you, because I have been advocating for this area for about 4 years, and I can confidently say that an air permit does not mean you're safe. A water permit does not mean you're safe. A mining permit does not mean it's safe, because they issue these permits, but they do not have the staff or the funding to ensure, to regulate, to follow up and make sure it stays safe. So nobody's gonna come save us. So it's really gonna be us. So again, I thank you all for being here. I am so grateful, and I really look forward to the panel, continued presentations, the panel discussion, and then the discussion after we are all done.
Hi, I'm Quinn. I started this whole data center thing because I posted a video on TikTok. I have family that is from Janesville, and I read an article about how they went into a closed session to talk about something that could hugely impact the community. And I couldn't believe it was legal, and sure enough, it is. And after talking about that on social media, I just sort of continued to learn and go down rabbit holes. And here I am today. I've been lucky enough to connect with the people at Great Lakes and all over the state. I met Charlie Barron's last night, which was a life goal, checked. I also, in my position, have been able to connect with so many whistleblowers and individual stories that would rip your heart out. As a quick story, there is a first generation farmer who was dealing with stray voltage. They had to cull their entire herd of 100 or so cows because they were not handling the voltage well and it wasn't sustainable. She reached out to me and she had done everything. She had contacted every single elected official, the PSC, the electrical companies, and nobody would do anything. And it is so heartbreaking to me that somebody reached out to a TikToker to figure out how to handle their electrical issues because nobody else was helping her. So let's, on that note, let's talk about some data center myths. Is it? Yeah. So this was kind of already talked about, but if you use Facebook, iCloud, the internet, you are guilty of needing data centers, and therefore you can't say, I hate data centers. That is not true. The difference between a micro data center and an AI data center is huge. Additionally, what a small data center is doing versus what an AI data center is doing. An AI data center is harvesting all of your information. At a certain point, Meta was using Messenger to connect and collect information from every single device that was connected to your router. So for example, I have kids that have an iPad, and when I had Messenger on my phone, they were scraping data from my kid's iPad. That is horrifying. And that is what they're doing with these AI data centers. That's what they're storing there. They're also, this is where they're generating the energy to create those videos that you see of eagles animated, dressed up like different countries on Instagram. It is the amount of damage that is happening to all of these things that we're speaking about for something that is just not worth it. And then also for these companies to continue to take advantage of the community is repugnant. The next myth is data centers create a lot of jobs, especially union jobs that will stimulate the local economy. This is actually one of my favorite things to talk about. So this is true-ish. Data centers will create thousands of construction jobs, but this creates a vacuum. If we're going to use Fort Washington as an example, Fort Washington's population is around 12,500. Thought I had the numbers. About 12,500. At its peak, that data center is going to bring in 5,000 new construction jobs. What happens when you bring in half of the current population and then it disappears when that job is done? We know what happens if we just look at the GM plan. We know what happens to a community. Additionally, there's a lot of conversations about union jobs. Love that. Data centers are notorious for union busting and bringing in outside work that is not union. We're seeing this in Michigan, and again, in Fort Washington, they just proposed essentially an RV park. And boy, seems like maybe they're gonna have a bunch of people come in. I used to work in a plumbing company, and we would have people travel all over the state and work on jobs that were long-term construction jobs. Never did we have a union employee set up, like living there. Sounds like somebody's coming from out of state. I did have that up. Another thing, so after everything is finished, we are seeing all of these claims about what these jobs create. Virginia is a state that has an abundance of these hyperscale data centers. And it allows us to get a kind of an idea on what we're looking at. What we're seeing is that data centers are creating less than 100 jobs per building. And in some counts, we're seeing 16 jobs per shift. So if we use Port Washington as an example, there is this hyperscale, they're bringing in 5,000 construction jobs. Those jobs leave, it creates this huge vacuum in a 12,000 person community. And then what? It's supposed to be what, 15 buildings maybe? So at the most, they're going to create 1,500 jobs. That's still a 3,500 person deficit in that economy. Another good one. Data centers won't raise your electrical rates. This is an excellent lesson on the spin game. So I like to say the words you say and the words you don't. So the Public Service Commission just approved a rate adjustment increase for electricity. $9.50 a month in 2026 and roughly $17.50 a month in 2027 for Alliant consumers. This is to pay for infrastructure. This is not to pay for a data center. Additionally, this infrastructure has been planned for, in some cases, 5 years in advance. So when a bill is proposed and it says energy or rates can't be passed on to the ratepayer for things that are supplying this data center, how do you measure that? How do you measure that? And then also, how do we know that Alliant isn't going to go, well, we have this planned. We have this plan before this data center showed up. So here is an example of me not knowing how to use the internet. So this is very embarrassing. So behind the state of Wisconsin is a striped state of Wisconsin. And this is a map of private utility service providers. I can tell you that We Energies and Alliant Energy are most of the state. In this slide here, it might be a little bit hard to see, but all of these red, blue, black, and green lines are American Transmission Company lines. American Transmission Company is essentially a regulated monopoly in the state of Wisconsin. They build the transmission lines for all of these high energy power. So they essentially have first right of refusal in the state of Wisconsin when it comes to building these lines. This is important. So ATC is an investor-owned company. The #1 owner in ATC is We Energies. They own 60% of ATC. The next largest owner, Alliant Energy. They own 16%. So what that means, boiled down, is Alliant Energy is making money off of you paying your rate, off of you paying and utilizing your electricity, off of the building of these ATC power lines, off of the building of substations, and off of your taxes, because they are getting tax benefits that you are paying for. So you are fronting their cost and back-ending their cost. So if we go back to my skills here, if you look on the smaller state of Wisconsin, you will see the 5 circles there. All 5 of those are data centers. They are all located on ATC power lines. You can't see the other state, but they are all located in privately owned electrical service providers. There is not a single hyperscale data center in Wisconsin that is not proposed on a power line that is investor owned and that is not in a privately or investor owned utility provider. Have another choice. So then this speaks to more about the energy that is used as well as the jobs. The thing is, I don't trust big businesses or when the government goes into bed with big businesses. And it is so hard for me to believe that they are going to increase things, the 3.5 gigawatt data center, and not raise rates. Especially outside of what the PSC is saying. I don't know how, I don't know what it's gonna look like, but boy, I don't know how else they're gonna do it. What? Oh, yeah, so this is Alliant buying the land in Beaver Dam. And a very interesting development in Beaver Dam is Alliant was part of the conversation way in the beginning, way before they showed up. And while this conversation was happening with the community, the council meetings and etc., Alliant started building on the substation that would support that data center. No permits. And that data center, QTS, this is the second time that they have done construction prior to the data center being passed and without permits. They're currently being sued in Dunn County in Iowa, Cedar Rapids area, because they illegally drilled 40 wells prior to anything being approved.
How's this data center compared to Big Dam?
Yeah, we'll touch on that. I'm not 100% sure on those specifics. So another interesting thing about your rates. Wisconsin Watch recently found that Wisconsin ratepayers are paying over $1 billion or will be paying over $1 billion for shuttered electrical power plants. The ratepayer is what pays for this infrastructure, and these people are paying it off still, even after that plant is not providing electricity. AI is a technology that is moving fast. 2 years ago, what was AI? If we think that we're not going to be paying off these data centers and the infrastructure to support these data centers well after this technology is obsolete, I think we are at the bare minimum being a little naive. We covered this, yeah. So one of the things that data center people love to talk about is closed loop cooling systems. In fact, in DeForest, the village president was schooling their marketing team on how to spin and talk about closed loop cooling systems. So do they use less water? Yes-ish, inherently. We don't totally know because they all claim that this is proprietary information. Each one of these companies say that they have this new system, this new technology that's going to lower the water usage. But nobody knows definitively what that is. This is from a pro data center website. And first I want to note that there is no source on this. Whenever you are reading any information, data centers or otherwise, if they don't have a source, that's a big old question mark. So here is saying that the data centers in Beaver Dam uses under 8,000 gallons a day. The data center in Beaver Dam isn't built yet, so I don't really know where they're getting that number from. The data center in Mount Pleasant is going to peak at 234,000 to 702,000. Again, not built yet, but the point to me is, even if this is an improvement, why is wasting an Olympic swimming pool a day considered a success? Like, that is crazy. And Additionally, what you'll see, especially in a lot of legislation written about data center regulation, is they'll say, limit water to just cooling. Data centers don't just do cooling, they also do a lot of chips. It is about 8 to 10 liters of water is used to make these microchips. That is not considered cooling. So what is that usage? How does that factor into it? Data centers provide economic benefits. The fact of the matter is it sets communities up for financial ruin. We've already talked about the job and the vacuum that that would create. The important vocabulary to know here is a tax increment district and a tax increment financing. The tax increment district is what the state or the community creates. What the community creates for new builds, essentially, or businesses. Well, they'll say, we want to create sort of a tax increment financing that will then help the growth of the community. I'm missing my map. So what that looks like is essentially you start with a baseline. That is the base property value of a community. And then what they will factor is they'll say, this is what the value is going to be after this project is completed. If we look at Port Washington, if I can pull up my numbers here quick. If we look at Port Washington, they have a $40 million base. That is what this tax increment financing is based on. The final plan is $8 billion. So that is what they are expecting this valuation to be after this is built. It is important to remember that they are expecting this complete build to take 18 to 20 years. There are children that are being born today that will not see it finished before they graduate high school. So in that, essentially, the city draws a map and says, this is this district. And they freeze the tax level in that district. And so the new developer, the big company, builds something that's going to generate $200,000 a year in taxes, let's say. So they capture anything that isn't the initial tax value. So let's say the initial tax value that they would pay is $10,000, and they're creating $200,000 total. So $190,000 that they would pay on taxes essentially goes into this slush fund that will be paid to pay off the built and the property taxes. It's like a little property tax bank account, essentially. In that time, over the 18 to 20 years, the taxpayer is not seeing any of those tax benefits because that $190,000 is going into that slush fund. And so the taxpayer is who, over those 18 to 20 years, the taxpayer is paying for things like construction damage, the roads. If we use Port Washington as an example, 5,000 construction jobs, 5,000 people driving in, 24-hour construction. Imagine the damage that that is doing to roads and communities and things that taxes take care of. There's no way that those taxes are not going to be raised. Additionally, Wisconsin has something where they can increase a tax levy on new builds. So they base that new build, the cap for that is 12%. So in order to increase that tax levy, you have to have a new build, and that's the only thing that you can increase your tax levy on. So if we use the example of $200,000, they can only raise their tax levy 12% of $200,000. So Fort Washington, again, if we use those numbers, Fort Washington is going to start out at $40 million. And this new build is going to end up being $8 billion. At the end of that new build, they need to find somebody who can bill us that $8 billion. That will never happen. In a community of 12,000 people, that there's no way somebody can come in and top Microsoft. This is. The myth is data centers are supported by a certain political party. This is 100% false. In fact, data centers are one of the most bipartisan, apolitical things I have seen in my life, and I know that that is echoed by a lot of people. Overwhelmingly, it does not matter who you vote for. The community does not want data centers. On the flip side, overwhelmingly, it does not matter what party these people are affiliated with. They really want data centers. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm certainly not trying to villainize or criticize. Listen, I get if somebody says, hey, $8 billion for your community, that's a big number. That sounds pretty good. All right.
Yeah, so we're gonna go over to.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so. These projects bring in a lot of money, and I think a big thing here is we all gotta like follow what's happening at our local government, right? And start following what's going on with TIFs and TIDs, and are they investing and incentivizing what we feel the direction and taking us the direction we want to go. And so after kind of that like base level presentation information sharing, I am very grateful to have the opportunity to have Cassandra Pope come up and share some of the experience of what has been going on in Janesville. Hello, everyone. My name is Cassandra Pope, and I am one of the organizers for No Janesville Data Center. I am honored to be here to share with you about our experience with the data center proposal that's going on in Janesville right now. Some of what I will talk about will relate to you guys in your situation. Some of it might not, but it will at least give you some perspective from people who are already in the thick of it, from a community member and volunteer point of view. So our story starts mid-July of last year. The city of Janesville acquired the GM Jacko property that's along South Jackson Street on the south side of Janesville. According to our city manager, within a couple of days after the acquisition, the city was approached by 2 data center developers that were interested in the site. The city immediately put out an RFP, a request for proposals, specifically for data center developers. There have been no opportunities for the community to weigh in on what they want for the south side or for that site in particular, because no long-term plans have been established for either. So when a data center developer came knocking on the door, the city opened it and entertained them. To our knowledge, there was no effort made by the city to consider any other options. So keep in mind, this GM Jacko site has been empty for a really long time, and the city knew that this was coming and that they were going to be developing this. They had time to create a plan of what the city and the community would want for this site, and they have not done so. So on August 25th of last year, the city council voted to create the GM Jacko Redevelopment Advisory Board. Its purpose, according to the memo that was attached to the agenda for the city council meeting, is to develop redevelopment framework, guide environmental remediation, create a new identity for the site, promote sustainable economic development, engage community and key stakeholders, position the site for long-term success, and foster collaboration and vision-driven oversight. I would like to note that this advisory board will have no say or determination regarding whether or not a data center can be put on the site. Their advisory oversight would not come into play until after that decision has already been made. On September 8th, the city council voted to approve the city manager's appointees for that advisory board, which includes 4 business owners, 4 residents, 1 local nonprofit leader, and the economic development directors of the city of Janesville and Rock County.
James Otterstein, the Rock County Economic Development Director, has already been involved and pushed for the town of Beloit data center proposal. At this point, the city was already getting huge pushback from the community, yet was continuing to move forward with no legitimate community engagement opportunities. So a group of concerned citizens stepped forward and created the No Janesville Data Center Facebook group. Our group's intention, much like the one that the No Beloit Data Center group has made, was to keep the community informed on the progress of the proposal and to give out factual information regarding data centers and the city's process. An online change.org petition was created, just like the one I have seen Beloit has done. And this is a non-binding petition that was simply just to show the opposition for the development. Almost 2,000 signatures have been attained for that petition. On November 4th, Janesville City Administration held its first community engagement session at the Woodman Sports and Convention Center called Community Conversation on Data Centers. Keep in mind, this is now almost 4 months after the original RFPs went out and no community engagement had been done to that point. The event was emceed by Tim Bremmel from WCLO and was basically just a conversation between him and the city manager. Over 300 community members were in attendance. Community members were allowed to fill out a question form to be submitted to Tim to potentially be asked of the city manager. But of the many, many question forms that were filled out, only a handful were actually asked. Every answer given was in support of a data center and framed it as a great opportunity for Janesville. This is also when the actual proposal for the data center was released to the public, shortly before this community conversations meeting. Veridian is proposing an 800 megawatt facility made up of 8 to 11 large 2-story buildings. Just before the next council meeting a few days later, the change.org petition signature list was sent to the city council members and to the city manager so that they could see that there was some serious opposition to this project. Hundreds of people attended that next November 10th city council meeting. Over 40 people spoke during the public comment period with hundreds of written comments, with the overwhelming majority speaking against the data center. Those who spoke in favor of it were mainly Forward Janesville members, which is our Chamber of Commerce, basically in Janesville, and union workers who were told that this would bring them long-term, high-paying jobs. At the end of the meeting, the council voted 5-2 to enter into a letter of intent with the data center developer, Veridian Acquisitions LLC. Each council member voting to approve this LOI cited that they were looking for more information, details, and answers that they felt would get answered during what they call this period of 120 days of due diligence. This is when the direct legislation petition came into play. Some of you may have heard about that. This is a legally binding petition that proposed a city ordinance. This ordinance would require that any development that would go on the GM Jacko site with over $450 million in project costs would be required to go to the voters in a referendum. This petition is not a no data center petition. This petition is for any development of that dollar amount or larger, because we realize that any development of that size is going to have similar community, health, and environmental impacts that a data center would have. So the goal was to make sure that the citizens would have the ability to decide on a project by project basis whether the benefits outweigh the risks of a project on that city-owned property. According to state statute 9.20, which is what the direct legislation comes from, a direct legislation petition needs a number of electors equal to at least 15% of the votes that were cast for the governor at the last general election in their city or village. That meant for Janesville that we needed to collect nearly 4,000 signatures, and we only had 60 days to get them. Even though the signatures were collected by volunteers over the holidays and during the inclement weather, on January 6th, we were able to turn in 4,674 signatures, hundreds more than was required. Yeah, that was amazing. The city council then had 30 days to complete one of two statutory options: either adopt the ordinance outright or send it to the next election for the citizens to vote on whether or not they want the ordinance. The city chose to send it to the ballot. That was fine. They had the opportunity to put it on the April election ballot, which if passed, would have allowed for citizens to vote on the data center project at the November election. The council instead insisted on a public hearing, which was not required by the statute, and put the referendum past the time limit to get it on the April ballot, pushing it back to the November ballot. That means if passed, citizens wouldn't be able to vote on any projects on that site until at least next April. It is not retroactive, so if the site gets sold before then, we wouldn't get a vote. The city now has extended the period of time to potentially complete a purchase, or now has an extended period of time to potentially complete a purchase agreement with the data center developer and sell the land before the residents can vote. Right now, the city has extended its 120-day due diligence period for another 60 days. The next step at the end of that due diligence period, according to the city's timeline, is a purchase and sale agreement. The city keeps diligently reminding everyone that we are still on the 1 yard line. It's just the beginning. They have assured residents that an LOI is not a binding agreement and that a purchase and sale agreement would not be finalized until after a development agreement is agreed upon, which could take 18 to 24 months. So supposedly we have plenty of time to pull out if we decide that this is not the best option. But at what point does sunken cost fallacy come into play, where the city says that they or the developer have too much time, money, or effort invested to turn back? A council member who has stated that a data center is a great opportunity for Janesville has already been quoted as saying that the developer already has a lot of money invested in this project, and it would be a disservice to them to pause any further development. Just because they can turn back doesn't mean they will be willing to. So in the meantime, the GM Jacko Advisory Board interviewed 4 separate redevelopment firms as potential consultants for this GM Jacko site, which I'm confused on why you would need a consultant if the data center proposal goes forward, but they're paying $250,000 to this consultant anyway. That's neither here nor there. Every single firm of those 4 firms confirmed that there are many redevelopment options for that property, and that community involvement was vital to the redevelopment of the site. On Monday, this past Monday, the city council voted unanimously to approve Stantec as the consultant for the property. This is the consultant that had the least high of community engagement. However, they still had community engagement as a priority. But Stantec is also involved in the town of Beloit data center proposal. They are assuring us that the firm is very large and that they have 2 separate entities in their firm working on this, but it's still the same company. Do with that information what you will. So for the last month or so, the Janesville City Council has been holding short data center workshops just before each council meeting. Their purpose is to give the city council expert information and perspective on data centers. Unfortunately, each of the workshops have hosted biased groups with skin in the game, such as Alliant Energy and Wisconsin Data Center Coalition. Every expert has given a positive response to data centers and has not included any cons or risks. We have yet to hear from climate, health, financial, or development experts who explain the risks and potential downsides to a development like this. Yet we expect our city council to make an educated decision. How, when every workshop, every comment, every interview, every meeting, and every presentation from the city has been a sales brochure in favor of data centers, trying to convince the community and the city council that this is a great opportunity that we should take. So that's where we are so far. So to be clear, the steps that we have taken in our community are not necessarily going to be options for other communities, as each development is different, each situation is different, each set of circumstances are different. For example, the way our direct legislation petition worked wouldn't work the same for the town of Beloit because our situation is different. You need to do a lot of research and consideration on which steps would be the most effective for you. This issue is much bigger than just the town of Beloit, and we all realize that. This is going to affect the cities of Beloit and Janesville and all of the surrounding towns and villages in between. This is going to affect Rock County as a whole and even have repercussions on the entire state. But we have to start somewhere. State legislation takes a long time to get put into play. We need action now. This is where you all come in, brainstorm, talk, get the word out about what's happening. Make sure as many people as possible know that the town of Beloit is considering a data center. Use your voice. Like Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you. All right, and so, next I'd like to invite up Sarah Zarling, who is an organizer for and supporting the folks in Beaver Dam. Again, Dana Fulton was the reporter that shared that the pre-development agreement was here, and she highlighted we have the same developer and we have the same actors, right? So they are much farther down the road. But I think it's very valuable for Sarah to share what Beaver Dam has experienced, what they're going through, and I'm grateful that she made the trip down. All right. Hello, everyone. This turnout is absolutely fantastic. It's been like, oh gosh, I'm sorry. It's like I've never done this before. This turnout is absolutely fantastic, y'all. I'm like, for real. Wow. We had something Brittany and every organizer who pulled this thing together so fast. Seriously, like this what's happening in this room right now is amazing. Yeah. So my name's Sarah Zarling. I'm a longtime community organizer. I started 11 years ago. I live in Watertown. I saw an oil train go by near where I lived. Sorry, I'm like distracted. I don't have anything prepared. Yeah, this is what I want to do. This is why I'm holding this. It's not to show you my cool stickers on my laptop. It's to play this. So this is my recent inner perimeter video that I did around the Beaver Dam data center site. So I'll just let that play while I talk. So, yeah. So 11 years ago, I saw an oil train go by near where I live in Watertown. Something told me to look up what these 100 shiny black tankers were, and I went home and I discovered that one had derailed in this little town in Canada and incinerated 47 people in part of their town. I was like, I don't want that going by my place or in my town. And so that's when I started falling down the rabbit hole of all things fossil fuel extraction, production, transport after the derailment in East Palestine, which is still contaminated, then it branched off into petrochemicals. And so data centers are just my latest endeavor. Yeah, I know it's good times. So what I do is I go to areas where bad things have happened, like that little town in Canada or like East Palestine, and I interview people, share their stories and document with photos and videos what's happened there. So the fact of when I found out about the data center proposal in Beaver Dam, it just fit right in with the scope of the work that I do. So since September, when I found out about that project, and ground had already been broken, by the way, and no one knew what was going on except for one young girl who was beside herself, feeling like, what do we do? And so I started making these drive-by videos. Every couple months I'll go and I'll do a drive-by of this inner perimeter here and show the progress of the construction. So this video is from a month ago, so the construction is progressing so fast that I need to already do another update video because it's going to be way far along than what you see right here, but this just gives you an idea. So basically what I've learned being on the ground, particularly in Beaver Dam, I've been helping the residents there organize. Beaver Dam's the community where I've been the most. Port Washington is next. And then with Quinn and Brittany, we're part of a statewide data center coalition of people who are trying to fight these things all around the state. So at this point, if there's an active or proposed data center project in the state of Wisconsin, I'm either directly or indirectly involved. And let's just say that I helped to organize that event in Beaver Dam last night with Charlie Barron's, which was totally epic. And Brittany was one of the speakers and Quinn was there too. Boy, I'm tired. But it's okay because, you know, even though I'm angry at them for continuing to do this community even though I'm angry at them for continuing to do this to communities, I'm happy to be here and fighting with you. And so if it's one thing I've heard in communities like DeForest and Greenleaf and Caledonia, where Prescott's from, who have defeated these projects, they say that the number one reason why they were able to is because of swift and relentless community engagement. So what's happening in this room gets you off to a wonderful start. So you guys gotta stay engaged and keep fighting, okay? Yeah. Where are we at? I want to try and be done by the time this video is done. I don't have anything prepared, by the way, because before I was in, over the weekend, I was in Potosi at another event that Charlie was at, for the Grant County proposal over there. So I just haven't had time to even look at anything. I heard that the proposal was here, and thanks to Brittany for squeezing me in like literally last minute, so I could just come in and share some things that I've learned in this time. So being on the ground in Beaver Dam and Port Washington, where there's this active construction, there's a Freudian slip there, but it works. Yeah, right. So where this active construction is happening in these communities, I now have a tagline that I've started saying, in regards to this issue. And that's that hyperscale data center construction is the most cruel thing a city can do to its residents. 100% for real. On our panel last night, we had some residents who live near that construction in Beaver Dam, and they shared some things that they're going through. And yeah, it just will make your blood boil. So it's really imperative that you guys do whatever you can to fight back against this. I will say that Prescott and I, we've been going around making appointments with elected officials to take meetings. We're thankful that there has been some data center legislation drafted in the recent months. But based on our homework, we discovered that there's holes in each of those pieces of legislation. And each appointment that we take with an elected official and talk to them, especially Prescott with the TID stuff, or TID talks as I've come to like to call them, we've discovered how grossly misinformed and uneducated they actually are about this issue. So we feel really strongly that if legislation is going to be drafted about data centers, that they should have all the information available to them before these things are passed into law, right? Like, to me, that just kind of makes sense. And so I've started feeling like we need something like citizen advisory boards where, you know, people who are working on the ground in communities, health experts, people who understand the impacts of data center construction, who are not being paid to convince you that these projects are a good idea. It's really important that legislators have that information from the other side of the coin as well. So just remember that these things start at the top. So in addition to getting engaged in your local community to fight back against this, accidental activists is what you're called whenever something lands in your backyard that now all of a sudden you're doing things you never thought you would do or were capable of. But it's actually really empowering because you realize how much you really can do and how your voice really matters. But we have to remember that these things start at the top. So the legislation really is key, having legislation that's going to actually protect you in the environment. So, you know, really making inroads with your elected officials, establishing good relationships and trying to get in front of them so you can all learn together, because this is still an emerging issue. Let's see where we're at. Oh my Lord. All right, Brittany says I gotta wrap it up. So, yeah, okay. I guess that's all I have for today. This gives you an idea of just how massive these projects are. And this project is smaller than Port Washington's. Good times, right? All right, thanks everybody. Thank you so much, Sarah. One of the big takeaways is, and she said it, but I need to elevate it again, is that Beaver Dam residents didn't know a data center was going in until ground was essentially broken. For months. They had, Alliant had purchased the farmland, they worked with the shell company, they worked with the city in the township to get it annexed, they worked to get the TID, they had the rezoning before anyone knew it was a data center.
right? And so I have had a cup of coffee on city council back in the day, and I just wanna say, like, sometimes proposals come before elected officials, and they haven't had the chance to fully vet it. So they're learning along with us. Our elected officials, local, I mean, and statewide, they are our neighbors. And so I'm super grateful for the ones who came out today to learn with us, right, on the impacts. And then all of you can continue to engage your neighbors and have these discussions to talk about impacts. Because I have reached out to the township, and John, very accessible, and he has shared, you know, there was that development agreement which protected the cost from like an analysis study that was done, which is doing their due diligence. But once that developed, and they have not had a development proposal provided by the developer. But once that hits, things can move really fast. So we were given a gift of time because otherwise these can move fast. Now the township could help pump the brakes, and I think that would be wonderful. But I do know that the pressure from developers is to put pedal to the metal. So we did have Prescott Bulch did share, and if we can't hear him, he had a recording for us. If we can't hear him well, he will come out to us to share some of his wisdom.
Hi, everybody. This is Prescott Balch. In case you don't know me, I'm the guy that's running around the state trying to help communities with their data center proposals. I was involved back in August, September, early October in Caledonia with my community's data center proposal, and we successfully got Microsoft to withdraw that at the 11th hour. I've learned a lot through that process, and I've certainly learned a lot in communicating with other municipalities around the state and even multiple states now. So I was asked by Brittany to put this together to try to just give you some brief what to do now thoughts. I want to start just by describing this as doing the job you would want your elected officials to do. You cannot assume that they are going to do this the right way. And the stakes are too high for you to just let them try to figure it out. So I think the best way to describe what you're doing here is becoming an unelected elected official to try to help them get to the right answer. This starts with simple organizational details, which are obvious that you probably already have started. Get an online meeting place, define a small core team, make sure they're dedicated to have both commitment and time. This is not a small amount of time. It will be probably a multi-month effort that's fairly stressful and time consuming. So make sure whoever that is, that they can make that commitment. Importantly, you should set some ground rules for the team. These are in the online meeting place. These are rules that we used. You don't have to use them, but they worked for us. So take them for what they're worth. No politics. This is a unique issue in that it crosses political boundaries. Everything these days seems to be very partisan. This issue is nonpartisan, and it's refreshing, to be frank, but I would highly recommend setting a ground rule that politics has no place. This is about your community, a data center proposal, and what it means to you. So you should treat it that way, and you should ask people politely to keep the politics out. You should also strongly encourage everyone being welcome, whether they are pro or con data center. You want engaged dialogue. You want to hear the pros and cons. You want to hear what people are thinking, what questions they have, and potentially you want to change people's minds in that forum. As long as everybody's polite and professional and actively engaging in constructive dialogue, you should let them stay and encourage them to do more of it. If you do have to apply rules for removal, just make sure they're evenly applied. You need to do the basics: signs, petitions, flyers, you name it, whatever your communication strategy is, get it started now. Make sure that everyone is aware that you're an organized group. Show up at meetings, public meetings, and make people aware of your organization's presence and begin speaking for that organization in a fairly formal way. You should also, unfortunately, think about finding a lawyer. You don't need one immediately. barring anything weird with your proposal out of the gate. But when you do need one, and if you do need one, you don't want to be looking for one. You want to have one ready to engage. So do your homework there soon. You also need to learn how local government works. Not very many people do. Many people couldn't tell you the difference between the planning commission and the city council, let alone what they approve and what it means. You need to understand what steps the proposal will have to go through and who votes on what, when, and what does it mean? Is it binding or not binding? You should also know when you will have opportunity for public comment and what the constraints are. Is it 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes? Is it planning commission? Is it city council, etc.? Also, do your homework on who's making the decision. Who is on the board? What makes them tick? What do they do for a living? What arguments and analogies, metaphors, how would you talk to somebody such that you might have a constructive dialogue? A farmer is going to react to different analogies and metaphors than a banker or an accountant. So the more you know about the people who are going to make the binding vote, the better. Plan a communication strategy for influencing them. I would recommend in-person meetings if you can get them. Don't bother with email. You can use an email campaign to show that you have numbers, but don't expect a lot of response from email. It's probably too much volume already. And when you start adding more on top, they're not going to respond. Likewise with phone calls, sometimes you'll get people that answer, sometimes you'll get people that answer back. It can be part of your strategy, but the best thing you can do is get face-to-face time with them to show that you've got some human beings on the other side of the discussion. You should also very much analyze your zoning. Find somebody to really dig deep into it and understand how it works and how it works, particularly in the context of a data center proposal. A lot of communities are not prepared with their zoning to deal with this new beast that are hyperscale data centers. Lastly, your arguments matter. They matter a lot, in fact. I think you should start trying to challenge yourselves to be honest about what the pros and the cons are. If you are reflexively opposed to this data center without being open to what the honest pros are, you will be dismissed as being reflexively opposed, and it will be counterproductive. You have to be open-minded and understand that there are indeed undeniable pros. They're largely monetary, but understand what they are and be ready to talk about them. Be ready to talk about what the risks are that are associated with them, and those risks become the cons. Know why your community is standing against this. Sometimes it could be financial risk. Other times it could be, this is a terrible parcel near residents, near schools, near hospitals. There are a number of different reasons depending on the community and the location of the parcels. And so understand why you're against it. What are your strongest arguments? What are your weakest arguments? And be brutally honest with yourselves and make sure that you're bubbling to the top and making the strongest arguments heard most commonly. If you focus a lot of attention on the arguments that won't sway people's opinion, those could be fantastic arguments that ring true, but if they're not going to change minds, you might as well deprioritize them. You have to be brutally practical about getting a majority of votes that go your way. Lastly, I'll say seek expert help from communities that have come before you. Caledonia, DeForest, Menominee, everybody's had some measure of success. Greenleaf, another one. Reach out to those communities through their online meeting places, largely on Facebook. They're easy to find. You can get help really quickly. You can seek out the expertise that is needed uniquely to your situation. And there are lots of people willing to donate their time and expertise to help you out, myself included. So good luck getting started with this. And I know it was stressful for me. There's a lot of help for you. And there's probably a long way to go because you've fortunately gotten engaged really early. The downside of that is you have a lot more work ahead of you and a lot more time to stay engaged on this, to see it through to conclusion. But it is possible to win the battles, to convince people of the right answer, whatever that might be for your community. And with that, I will conclude and say, I'm sure we'll be talking again soon. Thanks a lot.
For more information or to stay informed about the proposed Town of Beloit Hyperscale Data Center, join us on Facebook at No Beloit Data Center or scan one of the barcodes on this page to sign the petition and receive email updates. We'll continue sharing resources, community updates, and upcoming events so residents can stay informed, ask questions, and stay part of the conversation about decisions that could shape our community for years to come. And as always, your voice matters.